Hey guys, it's Sadie, and I'm here again with another Animal Artist Collective video, and I'm really excited about this one. I wanted to say before I get going that we have two new guest artists, Kat from Meow Meow Kapow and Amy from Amy Howard Art, and they are awesome artists. Definitely go and give them a little extra love for being our guest artist this month in the collective. So this month we are doing wetlands and swamps. So when I heard the theme for this month, I was so excited because if you don't know, I'm a Floridian. I grew up in Florida and I have spent a lot of time in the Everglades. So that was definitely the very first thing that I thought about. And of course, if you think of the Everglades and you think of Florida, you have to think about the Florida panther. Now, I don't know if you guys know about the Florida panther, but there's only a few hundred Florida panthers in existence. Actually, in the 90s, there were only something like 50 of them left. They're critically endangered, and they are actually Florida's state animal. So what is the difference between a Florida panther and other panthers? Well, they're a little smaller, they have a little longer legs, smaller feet, and a shorter coat because, yeah, obviously it's pretty hot in Florida. And they're the only example of the cougar, mountain lion sort of cat in the eastern part of the United States. I had a lot of fun painting this Florida panther because if you grow up in South Florida, these are like the names that you hear all the time. Okay, so South Florida is basically everything is named panther or flamingo or manatee or sawgrass or palmetto or spring something. So you definitely grow up with a sense of these very iconic Florida animals. And Florida is definitely a state with a bunch of unique biomes. So for sure, I'm going to be featuring at least one other Florida biome in the near future when we do another Animal Art Collective biome. I love putting this little red nosy in there. That was just really fun. This panther is really lots of browns. I think the colors that I used were like yellow ochre, and goethite was really nice for getting a fuzzy texture in the coat. Also, Old Holland's raw sienna deep. It's really nice to get some granulating colors in to make like a furry, soft texture. I didn't really have to do a lot of furry strokes because the coat is so short. It doesn't really look that furry when you look at it from afar. So just a couple of strokes and this granulating texture really helps out a lot. So why are there so few Florida panthers? Well, one of the things is that their habitat, the Everglades, is definitely not in the best state of affairs. The Florida panther, adult males especially, require around 200 square meters per panther, and adult males will not live in a territory if there is another male nearby. That's a lot of space. And the Everglades has been under threat from all kinds of different things for a very long time now, which I will talk about. So you could see why, if for one reason only, this animal is threatened. Besides that, there is a big issue with all of the animals that I'm going to talk about with motorcycle accidents. They get out of the Everglades, they get into more human territory, and they get run over by cars. Also, since there is so few of the Florida panthers left, or as I told you, in the 90s there were only like 50, and they have to do interbreeding in order to bring back the population, there are a bunch of genetic disorders that they have from interbreeding, and they're also vulnerable to a large number of diseases, including a type of feline distemper and also chemicals. Apparently, they're very sensitive to chemicals. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Everglades and a little bit about my relationship to the Everglades. You can barely see me in this picture because it was taken on probably whatever kind of cheap waterproof disposable camera I could get back then from Walmart, and we had to leave before the sun really came up. So I was in the science magnet, and for those of you who are not familiar with the United States educational system, and also some Americans who don't know about the magnet program, there are magnet programs which are often specialized programs for children who are doing different subjects. There are art magnets, there are, are there history magnets? There are definitely language magnets. There are filmography magnets, and there are science magnets and international baccalaureate. And when I was in middle school, I was in the science magnet. And this meant that we did a lot of experiments and we did a lot of field trips to the Everglades. I feel like we were always in the Everglades. And it was really cool because we were actually able to contribute to the science and the research being done on the Everglades by going out there and collecting specimens, counting different members of wildlife, checking on the water quality and different things like that. So I happen to have a couple of the photos from back then scanned. Obviously, it's going to look like from a million years ago, but you can kind of see some of the pictures that little Sadie took back then and see a little bit of what I saw when I was going into the Everglades. There are a lot of different parts of the Everglades. Some parts are full of mangroves, some parts have hardwood hammocks, some parts have beaches. It's a really crazy place. The Everglades is actually the northernmost tropical environment, and it's an entirely unique place with unique animals. There are a ton of unique native and invasive species in the Everglades, and actually 67 of the species that call the Everglades their home are threatened or endangered. Many of them are endangered because of invasive species. The big problem that happens in Florida is that people will buy some kind of animal as a pet, and then when they are tired of it, they will drop it off into the Everglades. So there is a really big problem with Burmese pythons in the Everglades, basically just going around and eating everything else. So that is really not cool. Besides that, there is an issue with water control and encroachment. Unfortunately, there is a very long and sad history of people, particularly settlers in the beginning, attempting to deliberately destroy the Everglades because it was considered that wetlands were a thing that should be destroyed. Not only that, but actually different Native American groups lived in the Everglades, including the Seminoles. And during the Second Seminole War, the main goal was to try to kill all of the Seminoles that they can and take the land. And so part of the process of that was destroying the Everglades. Unfortunately, things not exactly like this are still happening, but the land is still definitely being deliberately destroyed, with communities being built that encroach into it and take away the space. This was happening when I was a young kid, and there's even a community called Ave Maria that is going to be built soon, apparently, and it will also encroach into the Everglades, even though the Everglades has actually been called a wetland area of global importance. And a huge conservation project has been started to try to restore it to a healthy state of being, which is considered the most expensive and most comprehensive environmental restoration attempt in history. And I, for one, really hope that it works out. So the next animal I have up is the Florida black bear. This is a pretty rare bear. You're probably not going to see this bear if you go to the Everglades, even though it is no longer on the endangered species list. It was until 2012 when it was delisted. Although many people protested this decision because they didn't think that the population was very healthy. Despite that, there was a bear hunt in 2015, and 295 of these bears were killed. That's just really disturbing to me. They just got off the list and you decide, well, let's go and kill a bunch of them. I'm sorry guys, I don't want to be super sad, but that just boggled my mind. However, there is a petition since 2016 to get them back on the list and have them have protected status again. Just like the puma, one of the biggest things that threatens them is motor vehicle accidents. And one of the things that they like to eat is alligator eggs. I really enjoyed painting this guy because it was really fun to have all of these really washy, flowy washes underneath before I started putting down the hair. Unlike the puma, the bear has a lot of long, shaggy hair. So it was definitely important to get that texture in, but I felt like the coat had a kind of bluish highlight, so I wanted to put that in first. For a lot of the brown and redder tones in these paintings, I used the Hushwing palette again. Isn't his little face so cute? I added a little red because I thought it would be nice to have a little bit of that. It felt warmer at these places. And I added a little bit of grass to the bottom to have just a little bit of nature. In all of these pieces, I ended up using watercolor pencils and regular colored pencils. I don't know why. I've been into a really kind of mixed media mood. Also, it makes things a lot faster. Well, depending on what you're doing. The thing that I like about watercolor pencils is that you can just hit them with water and then they just really blend in and give you this soft line instead of a hard line. But the thing that I like about using regular colored pencils with watercolor is that then I can put watercolor on top of it as well as beneath it. And the pencils really helped in trying to get this furry texture on the bear after already putting it in a lot of the work with my watercolors. But you can see me like scrubbing it out and softening it and working back and forth. Next up is the alligator. So this is a problem that I've always had. What's the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? Okay, I don't really know the difference between them, but I know how to tell them apart. An alligator has a U-shaped snout and a crocodile has a pointy snout. Also, crocodiles tend to be bigger and lighter than alligators. Alligators tend to be darker. I'm painting a lighter alligator. That's because it's young. Even though it doesn't look young, that looks like a big old fat fella. It was interesting painting this alligator because obviously it's covered in scales, and I had to make the decision, am I gonna go there with the scales or am I not? And I decided to go there with the scales, and that was actually a lot of fun. At first, I started out with a pretty colorful mix of just a wash because I didn't want it to be just totally blah. In the reference photo that I used, the alligator was very gray. It just would have been tones of gray, and I didn't really want to do that. So I just kind of, in my imagination, pumped up the saturation and made things a little bit more vivid and vibrant than they would be in reality. So this is one of the parts where I'm talking about I like that I can go back and forth because I decided to use a regular colored pencil here instead of a watercolor pencil because I knew I wanted to put watercolor on top. So I just went in and did a little bit of detailing with a regular colored pencil, and then obviously I'm going to keep painting so I don't have to worry about it smudging at all. But the thing about scales is the most important thing is the shadows that come from the overlapping parts. And it's not entirely evenly shadowed. It's shadowed, especially right underneath these little corners where they overlap. And I wanted to make sure that I got that in before I kept going with my paint. So alligators are actually a keystone species in the Everglades because the holes that they make, these gator holes, actually hold water for other animals during the dry season. So without them, these animals would not have any access to water and they would die. So that's kind of crazy. I don't know about you guys, but I've never really thought about alligators being particularly important or particularly special. But learning that they serve this kind of role in the Everglades was pretty cool. I also didn't know that there are alligators only in the United States and China, and there's probably more alligators in captivity in the zoo in China than in the wild. And the Everglades is the only place where alligators and crocodiles live side by side. So that is pretty cool and confusing. I think we were kayaking on our own in the Everglades as middle school students, and we saw, I think, a huge group of either alligators or crocodiles. The thing is, they're actually quite docile. Well, actually, I don't remember. I think alligators are docile. I'm not sure if crocodiles are. One of them's a docile. I hope it was the ones that we saw, but I remember we were so scared. I've never tried to canoe out of a place that fast in my life. Well, no. One time there was a giant python above us and we were pretty sure it wanted to drop into our canoe. I think we pedaled. We didn't pedal. You paddle. I don't think that we paddled any faster in our lives. That was crazy. So alligators start out as little 10-inch babies, and they can grow to be over 10 feet, 12 feet, something like that. And they eat pretty large mammals, including the bears and panthers that I was just talking about. I guess it's getting back at that bear for eating its eggs. I don't know. Doing these animal art collective pieces and researching on the animals has really impressed upon me how much the pet industry and the exotic animal industry affects animals in nature, which I guess seems obvious, but it never occurred to me how much havoc it can wreak. I mean, one of the big problems in Florida is literally people flushing different kinds of pets down the toilet, and it ended up in the water stream. The last animal that I wanted to feature was a spoonbill. I wanted to do something with bright colors and also something that's kind of funny, because I think a lot of people, when they think of Florida, they think of the flamingo. But the flamingo is not native to Florida. That's right, you were lied to. But the spoonbill is native to Florida, and it's pink, and it's got a really weird bill, so that's cool, right? Just like the flamingo, its coloration of its feathers comes from the food that it eats, but it's not under any particular threat, but it's definitely considered, because of the bright pink feathers, an animal that is iconic for the Everglades. So what can you do to help the Everglades? Well, just like before, a lot of these things come down to the same stuff that everybody's been telling you. Conserve energy, don't litter. I think in the case of the Everglades, there is a particular focus on water, because actually, when the Everglades is in its healthy state, it helps to filter the water that flows through it. And that actually was very important to Florida's water drinking supply. And if you're a Floridian, you know the kind of issues that we have with our water and with the quality of the water in Lake Okeechobee. It's not doing so great. One of the big things is try, if you can, to calm down on your lawn. I know that you want your lawn to be looking the freshest and the flyest, but the amount of water that is often used for lawns, the amount of pesticides, fertilizers, the runoff from it, all of this can really wreak havoc in our water systems. That's anywhere that you are. So I think that it would be important to think about these things. If you're in a place where it's possible for you not to have a lawn, or to have one of those desert succulent lawn things, which are actually pretty cute, that would be a really good idea, because then you're kind of eliminating that problem entirely. And then that's less work for you, because I personally am not a big fan of stuff like mowing the lawn. The other thing is, of course, and it even feels weird to say this, but don't just dispose of your pets or animals in the wilderness. Take them to specialists, take them to pounds, take them to someplace safe where they won't be released into the wild and wreak havoc on the native species of an area. Because ecosystems are delicate and they came together over a long time to be in balance with one another. And when you introduce something new, depending on what it is, they can completely take over. Besides that, it's just cruel. Love your pets because they love you. So I hope this wasn't too much information. I know it was a bunch of different species and I wanted to talk about the Everglades, and I really hope that you guys look up more information about the Everglades. The Everglades is so cool. If you ever go down to Florida, I think it would be definitely cool to go take a tour of the Everglades. Check out who you're doing a tour guide with, because there are some weird people doing tours and they even disturb some of the animals. So make sure that you're going with somebody who is responsible and who knows how not to disturb the habitat while letting you go look around. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, go check out everybody's videos. I have the link in the description below. Thank you again to my Patreons. It's because of you guys I got these color pencils that I'm able to use on these paintings, which is so cool. In addition to the 4 original paintings, of which 50% will go to the Everglades Foundation to protect and restore the Everglades, I will also be selling a print with all of the animals on it that you can see here. And obviously the price will be a bit lower than the originals, and 50% of that will also be going to charity. And after 2 weeks, a digital print of this poster will be available for my Patreons. So if you want that in 2 weeks, then get all over to my Patreon page. So thank you guys. I had a lot of fun doing this. I hope you had fun watching this and learning, and I hope I wasn't too much of a Debbie Downer. I just feel sad about the Everglades sometimes, and I really love it. So just wanted to talk about it. Thank you guys for watching. Go check out everybody else. Talk to you next time. Bye.